This is my 1979 Volkswagen Brasilia, which I bought sight unseen on Facebook Marketplace.
Turning back the hands of time to July 2021, this is the video the seller sent me prior to me impulse buying the car. Now this is a classic car, so I didn't think anything looked too alarming. The interior looked pretty square and the bodywork looked pretty square, so I pulled the trigger and I bought it. £8,750 later, it was secured on the lorry, ready to come home. The car was in Manchester and I was in Norfolk.
Once the car arrived home, I stripped the carpet out and I was greeted with a proper rusty mess. So I stripped it out completely and had a go at doing a DIY job of painting the floor to prevent it rusting even further.
3 years on, the chassis travelled to HR Waterworks so it can have a full restoration and repaint.
Get it in Jake's workshop so he can work his magic on it.
But Jake wasn't impressed.
Once I dropped the car off with Jake, he was a little bit unimpressed with the state of the car. My bill almost doubled, and that was just the surface. That was before he'd even stripped it apart and seen what this thing was hiding. Once we made it home, my phone sounded a little bit like this. And that was Jake sending me pictures of how bad the chassis really was once he'd actually stripped it down to pieces and saw what he was working with, which meant my bill went even higher.
There was holes in the chassis on the underside, but we wouldn't have ever found them without taking on this process. As you can see, there's another one here. But worst of all, where the rear suspension mounts was completely rotten. The frame head was like Mr. Bean's patchwork jacket, and worst of all, the brakes weren't powerful enough to power them. The chassis was looking really tired. Not good. The engine was absolutely gopping, covered in oil, and didn't look very well presented at all. So Jake got ahead, stripping it to pieces, and worked his magic on that too.
A few weeks later, my phone was blowing up from Jake once again, but this time he wasn't sending me horror stories. He was showing me some of the awesome work he has done on our chassis, and it is now completely transformed. So what work is actually being done? So starting from scratch, the chassis was completely stripped to a bare shell and was sandblasted. Jake fixed the rust. There's certain areas where there was rust, made sure that all the rust work was taken care of before we had it completely powder coated in a satin black, I think it was, a satin black powder coat to encapsulate and protect that from rusting further and making it look nice. Once it was powder coated and everything was really nice, it was a case of building it up step by step, putting all the parts back on it and changing out all the ones that aren't really worth putting back on and needed changing, because at the end of the day, it's never going to be in this state ever again, and this is the perfect opportunity to do these things, which is part of the reason why it ended up costing us even more money. So Jake put the gearbox back in, made it all look really nice, new CV boots, made sure everything was just polished, shiny, clean, put back together. We had a new clutch kit put in it, and everything has just been done really good. New bearings, new brackets, hinges, anything, you name it, it's had it new put on. The air suspension's been put back on it. Now, it was a little bit tatty and tired where I put it on the first time, so Jake's gone over that with a can of aerosol. I didn't want him to strip that to pieces because that would be more labour that obviously we'd have to pay for. We've fixed that, made that nice and clean. Up in the front, you've seen already, Jake has put a new brake servo in there, giving us more brake pressure and power because we have got disc brakes on the front, and the old brake system never would have coped with that itself. All new brake lines. We have opted for a few modifications, which I'll go into in a minute. Everything has just been put back on after being cleaned up and freshened up. Now, one of the most exciting parts for me is the engine. Jake's completely gone through the engine, made sure everything of that is working really nicely. The piston rings were a little bit, I don't know what the word is, there was some play with the piston and the cylinder, so he's put all new piston rings, rebuilt the engine up, made it really nice, and painted it in a lovely, lovely colour, which I shan't reveal yet, so I will put some pictures on the screen of that, but it just looks really good, and most importantly, it's actually working now. But let's talk modifications. Now, the Brasilia has had a few. The first one was that new slave cylinder or master cylinder, whatever you want to call it, with a little reservoir on top so we can do a delete under the front to make it look nice and smooth. We've got rid of the dynamo. Now, for people who don't know, I didn't really know this, but a dynamo is basically the thing on the front of the engine which in turn makes you electricity, which is basically an alternator, which is what we've done. We've done an alternator conversion. As we run the air ride on this thing, and we're going to use this, we're going to drive it, we need to make sure that we're putting enough power back into the battery to power the air ride. We've also upgraded the engine. We've got rid of the fuel pump. We're going to do that externally to make it look nicer. We've got rid of the dizzy cap. We've gone for electronic ignition to make it a little bit more reliable. We've got a new dampener on the steering to make the steering feel even more comfortable. We're just trying to make sure we can do all these little bits and pieces which are going to make driving this thing all the more better, because at the end of the day, that is what I want to do. I've only driven this car once since I've owned it, and I want to make this a driver's car as well as being a show princess. You can probably imagine my excitement every time Jake messaged me, sending me pictures of work that had been done. It felt like Christmas every single time he messaged me. Knowing the car is 3 hours away makes you feel a bit anxious enough, but the fact that it's completely transforming whilst it's over there is absolutely awesome. Last time the engine was in there, it ran like a bag of spanners, misfired and didn't run very well, but Jake has just sent me this video of it now running again. Cannot wait to get this thing home now, but unfortunately the chassis isn't ready, and that is the end of this video. So that means one thing: you're going to have to tune back in next time when we go and collect it to see the finished final article. If you have enjoyed this video, smash that thumbs up button, smash the subscribe button down below, hit the bell icon so you don't miss our future uploads, especially not missing when we reveal this thing fully. Thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you in the next one.